You're with Kat Feeney on ABC Radio Brisbane and Queensland.
Do you have a Hecs debt, a help debt? Is there someone in your family who is carrying a few $1,000s worth of student debt? Well, seeing as the rates on these debts are indexed, and it's very likely that in June next year it's going to go up, what do you need to do? Do you need to start thinking perhaps now about addressing that level of debt? Well, you're going to hear from someone who will walk you through how the student loan system works in Australia and offer some ideas that could be useful to you. Keen to hear from you, of course. 1300 222 612 is the telephone number. That's 1300 222 612. You might have heard them referred to as the best loan you'll ever get. And it is true that at a repayment rate of just 0.6%, these loans are a good deal, but just like almost everything else, the repayment rate is about to go up. So is now the perfect time for you or your children to pay off their student loan? Some answers and practical advice coming your way in a moment.
ABC Sports Summer of Cricket.
Tuesday. Join ABC Sports cricket coverage of the one-day international between Australia and England.
Hammers it for four. What a shot.
Australia v England.
This is the one-dayer you won't want to miss.
Live from the MCG in Melbourne.
Summer never sounded so good.
Tuesday on ABC Radio, ABC Sport Digital and live on the ABC Listen app.
Nei, Ruth, nei, na nangiwa, ya nangiwa, Duraramble, Gugum, Gugoi, Ante. My name is Ruth. I come from Bow Desert and I'm a Yugruple person and I speak the Yugruple language. And you're listening to ABC Radio.
You're with Kat Feeney on ABC Radio Brisbane and Queensland.
It's 1:15. Is it time to think about repaying the Hecs help debt that you might have accrued over a few years of studying for the job you now have, or just because you enjoy studying? Or maybe you're looking at helping out your children with their student loans. In a moment, you're going to hear from Phil McGann, who's the Director of Claritude Financial Planning here in Brisbane. Some practical tips and advice. And of course, just a reminder that a conversation is general in nature and you are well advised to seek out your own personalised financial advice from the qualified professional. Before we hear from Phil, though, I wanted to set the scene with Melody's help. Now, Melody, you're in Carindale. Hi, Melody.
Oh, hi, Kat. I'm just turning down, trying to prep for dinner.
Oh, good.
And
Well
what happened with our family, our daughter was facing a lot of difficulties in her life. She was a single mum with a little one, and she decided to undertake a nursing degree while working as an endorsed enrolled nurse. So she studied, she worked, she's raised a young child, and getting toward the end of her course became quite despondent. The end goal was being lost. And my husband and I thought about this deeply and greatly admired her courage. So we suggested to her we pay her Hecs debt, and which was many thousands, I might add. We did.
Wow, that's
We
very,
did. She
very
was
loving and generous of
extremely
you.
Grateful.
I bet.
And guess what? She's just doing her last placement at the Royal Brisbane. She'll qualify, hopefully, the end of December, and that will be the best Christmas, New Year's gift we could possibly give our daughter.
Melody,
And
that's
our
lovely.
granddaughter.
So your daughter's Hecs debt, it was thousands of dollars.
It was many things. I'll tell you, approximately, it was over $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
She's a single mum, renting,
Yeah.
and trying to survive. Yep.
Yeah. And so, I mean, without your help, things would have been fairly tough for your daughter, I expect, Melody.
Well, she would carry the debt for some considerable years, I would imagine, until she reaches that threshold where, it would be deducted from her pay. And but she would like to move on to the next level, get a really good job, and she's been very fortunate. Queensland Health have offered her a new graduate position.
Oh, great.
And won it on interview and a package, very proud. But for her to be able to move into a sphere to give back to the community, to our public, She's shown her young daughter we can do this with family, with friends, with support, and the government help too. With Hecs, we can do this.
Melody, I'm really glad you called. Thank you and congratulations to your daughter. I'll let you get back to dinner prep because that is also important. But
It is. And I've just got to win the Elton John tickets and life would be perfecto. Okay?
Indeed. All right. I'll see what we can do, Melody. Of course, ABC Radio Brisbane does have the chance for you to get along to see Elton John in his Brisbane concert. Stay listening to hear more about how you can get involved that way. But let me bring in Phil McGann from Claritude Financial Planning because as Melody's described, Phil, student debt can be quite a significant amount of money to end up owing upon completion of graduation. But there are rules that affect how soon you need to pay that off. Yes. And there's also rules that affect how much interest is accrued on a student debt. Correct. So let's just begin with the basics. What is the Hecs Help Scheme in Australia? Right.
Basically, what the Hecs Help Scheme is, it's been around for about 35 years now. So brought in the late 80s by the Hawke government. And the idea is that the government will pay for individuals' university education, but they co-contribute. They basically give them a loan and they assist in the payment of that. So it's basically everyone trying to sort of help out rather than having free education in Australia. Now, the idea is that you accrue this debt, but you only have to pay it back once you earn a certain threshold of income. And that's changed over many years. There's no interest that's levied on the debt, but it's indexed each year to the CPI. Now, how that's sort of come into play over the last little while has been over probably up till about 8 or 9 months ago, the indexation was quite low. As you said in your introduction, in the 21 year, the indexation was 0.6. Before that, it was about 1.8 or 1.9, so it was quite low. But now inflation's rising and the CPI has gone up, and so the indexation has gone up. In June this year, in 22, it was 3.9%. Highly likely next June, once we come along to it again, it'll probably be something like 6 to 7% if inflation stays at the levels that are currently at the moment and what has been forecast by the RBA as well. So that starts to mean that your Hecs debt or help debt is going up maybe next year by closer to 6 or 7%, starting to get quite expensive in relation to other things. A real general rule of thumb, and I know things that I've spoken to a lot of clients about over the years, it's a fairly cheap debt. So you'd prioritise paying off credit cards or personal loans or car loans or maybe even mortgages before you'd pay that one down or pay anything extra. You are paying it as your income reaches a certain level. But now inflation has gone up and indexation has gone up. It starts to change the goalposts a little bit. So you really should consider what you want to do with that debt. More so now. It's a very individual thing, but obviously, as we've seen, that's one example. Wonderful Melody and her daughter. That's a great story. But for a lot of other people out there, they've got different circumstances altogether. Mm-hmm.
So is there a means of you being able to pay the debt off before you hit the threshold where those repayments are compulsory?
Yeah. Basically, what the government does is when you enter a course and you actually start a course off, you can actually pay money up front. You can pay your contribution up front if you want, or part thereof. If you pay over $500, you get a 10% discount. So it's reasonable. But once the debt's in place, if you pay early, there's no discount. So basically, the only way you get a benefit is you pay the debt before the indexation kicks in.
Which means enrolling as a full fee paying student to begin with?
Is that
how it works?
It's not so much sort of that as such, but it's really a case of you need to basically jump in there and pay off your debt before the census date. There's a census date for each course you enter into as well.
All right. Just a reminder that our conversation is general in nature, and if you are seeking financial advice, do speak to the appropriate professional in person. My name's Kat, and Phil McGann is with you from Claritude Financial Planning. So let's just, again, I find examples really helpful. So let's say, for example, you have a student debt balance of about $20,000. How much will that debt increase by on June the 1st?
Right. Well, going back to June this year, it went up by almost 4%. So that debt would go up by $800, and that would show up on your statement. Next June, if you make no repayments, the debt will go up even more. So if it goes up by 6 or 7% next year, and potentially it could do, we don't know exactly until the indexation figures come out, but inflation is running at those sorts of levels, you may well find that you go up another $1,200, $1,400, that sort of thing. So it's starting to add up a lot there. It used to be the case when you did a hierarchy of the debts you owe. Credit cards are up here, and Hecs debt was the cheapest debt you had. Now it's starting to creep up a little bit higher
Because of inflation?
because there's no interest. There's no interest rate on it. It's just indexation, and indexation is the CPI. That's how they sort of work it through. And it's highly likely that at the moment, inflation is running a bit hotter. Obviously, interest rates are going up to curb that, but home loans are about 5%. Most people out there would be paying about 5%, a little bit over, a little bit under, depending on the bank you're with. We might have a couple more interest rate rises to come, but if indexation goes up to 6 or 7% next year, you may well be in the situation where your Hecs debt is more expensive than your home loan.
That is, it's ballooning at a faster rate.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. Now, it's not a huge debt in the big scheme of things, so you may well see that you may have a Hecs debt of 25 or 35 or 40 grand, and your home loan might be $300 or $400 or $500,000. So it's not exactly comparable, but it starts to look at individual situations. You need to look at your situation, your cash flow, to see where it's at.
It's just this big burden of debt, though, isn't it, that seems to be getting bigger.
It is getting a little bit up there. And the repayment always bears talking about as well, because the thresholds, when you get to about $48,000, that's what the figure is at the moment, you've got to pay 1%.
When you start to earn $48,000.
Yeah. So once your income hits $48,000 and above, the government says your normal tax rates apply, but there's an extra 1% to pay off the Hecs debt. And then it goes up and up and up from there. And I looked at the figures before, $140,000 income, you've got to pay 10% of your income as an additional tax to pay off the Hecs commitment. So when you work it all through, if you do have a sizable debt there, if you have the ability eventually to pay it off all at once, would save you a lot of cash flow as well from less tax getting taxed on your income every pay period.
And the debt itself growing every time indexation increases.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is, again, really important to consider your individual circumstances here. Yeah.
More so than anything else we talk about, really, because there's so many different moving pieces in this one here.
How big the debt is, what your income might be, your
and
other
also
commitments.
If you're paying, like to get away from actually paying any Hecs back, you have to pay the whole debt out. So if you owe $10,000 and you have $5,000, I'll pay it off it. You still have to pay the set amount via your pay each week or each pay period until you pay the whole thing off. So there's no real cash flow saving there. So you've got to be careful about how that all works through. And likewise, if you're paying different debts down, if you've got a home loan, you put extra money into it, well, most people have a redraw facility to draw that money out. You pay your Hecs debt off, that's it. There's no money to come back. The government just sort of pays the debt off, that sort of idea.
Yeah.
So there's swings and roundabouts.
Okay, then. So how would someone then go about making an early repayment on the Hecs help loan?
It's very, very easy. Basically, everything's linked together with your MyGov account. Most people have MyGov accounts to access government services. If you've got the ATO linked to that as well, click through and there'll be a big Hecs bill there saying, this is what your Hecs bill is. Do you want to make a voluntary repayment? BPay. Easy. Click, 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 and you pay some of it off. So it's a very straightforward process these days, like a lot of things with government services, using the MyGov portal. So
if you decide it is right for you based on your own financial advice and considering your own situation, that is how you might go ahead. Phil McGann, this has been really interesting. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Oh, look, the only thing there, I mean, I know that Melody sort of said about helping her daughter out, and that's a wonderful story and great on her situation there. I talk to a lot of pre-retirees, people saying, well, I'm getting close to retirement and I want to help the kids out and pay their Hecs off. I don't know if it's a fantastic idea. It hurts their retirement plans, but it also doesn't do the kids a great service, I don't think. If you actually have to contribute to your own education, you have some ownership of that, you actually see benefit in that, you probably work a bit harder in your course, you're incurring this debt, and you are a bit more committed when you're out working as well. So it's a bit of a, I don't know if it's a fantastic idea for everyone out there to pay their kids' Hecs debt off when they can do it themselves over time and gets a bit more ownership in there.
It's interesting. Certainly a lot to consider. Phil, thank you very much.
No problems, Kat.
For your insight this afternoon on ABC Radio Brisbane and Gold Coast. Phil McGann with Claritude Financial Planning. And our conversation's general in nature, so if you are seeking financial advice, then do speak to the appropriate professional in person.